Oh, you're fine, buddy. We're still in the book of Psalms, chapter 119. And verses 137. And this one is Tizadi, and it can represent T's or S's. It represents the number 90, I'm sorry. And some of the words associated with it are a fish hook, to pull toward, something inescapable, desire, trouble, a harvest, righteous, or to hunt. And what this talks about is God's righteousness. It says, righteous art thou, O Lord, and upright are thy judgments. Thy testimonies that thou hast commanded are righteous and very faithful. My zeal hath consumed me, because mine enemies have forgotten thy words. Thy word is very pure, therefore thy servant loveth it. I am small and despised, yet do not I forget thy precepts. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Trouble and anguish have taken hold on me, yet thy commandments are my delights. The righteousness of thy testimonies is everlasting. Give me understanding, and I shall live. As I was studying this one here, I come across a thing, a little bit of history. This is around the year 600 AD. There was a feller named Emperor Maurice. And by this psalm, he was encouraged to bow to the will of God. So for 20 years, he had a virtuous rule. And he was set up to succeed Tiberius II. Tiberius was about to die. Well, the army didn't want him. They didn't want a virtuous leader. So they rebelled against him, took his family captive. He had 5 children, and they executed all of them, but he was the last to die. And every time they killed one of his children, he recited this 137. Righteous art thou, O Lord, and upright are thy judgments. That's what he said when he executed every one of his children. I don't know that I'm that man. Son. Makes me think of Stephen when they stoned him. Stephen was praying for the people that was stoned him. Yeah. I hope I can be that man someday. That's some serious business. But if you read some world history, a lot of these leaders would memorize this song. But now they weren't followers of the Lord. You can read how they ruled, but they would still memorize these psalms, which I still don't understand. But this particular person, Emperor Maurice, apparently he had been a virtuous man and ruled for 20 years, but the army didn't want no part of him. So they did away with him. The next one is Cope, but you can pronounce it with a Q or a K. It represents the number 100. And things that are synonymous with it are the back of the head, what is behind, last, final, or the least. And I guess if you could put anything on this would be maybe the heart's cry of this psalmist. We learn a little bit from this feller. In 145, it tells us how he prayed. In 146 is what he prayed. 147 is when he prayed. 148 is how long he prayed. 149 is what he pleaded. 151 is how he was rescued. And 152 is how he witnessed the truth. It says, I cried with my whole heart, hear me, O Lord, I will keep thy statutes. So that's how he prayed. I cried unto thee, save me, and I shall keep thy testimonies. What he prayed. I prevented the dawning of the morning and cried, I hoped in thy word. When he prayed. But that word prevented here doesn't mean that he was able to keep the dawn from happening. He was trying to forestall or anticipate that thing. So, I prevented the dawning of the morning and cried, I hoped in thy word. Mine eyes prevent the night watches, that I might meditate in thy word. So, it looks like he prayed all night here. Hear my voice according to thy loving kindness, O Lord. Quicken me according to thy judgment. And we've seen this quicken several times. It means to restore, amongst other things. So, O Lord, restore me according to thy judgment. So that's what he pleaded. It says, they draw nigh that follow after mischief. They are far from thy law. Thou art near, O Lord, and all thy commandments are truth. So that's how he was rescued, I guess you'd say. It says, concerning thy testimonies, I have known of old that thou hast founded them forever. So he, through this, has witnessed the truth of the Lord and his commandments. Like I say, these Psalms are not head knowledge, they're heart knowledge. This person lived through this, whatever affliction that he had. But at least he knows who to cry unto anyway. Anybody got anything before we go to the next one? Well, this one is Resh, and it is pronounced with an R. It's the 20th octane, and it represents the number 200. And it's a head, a person. What is the highest, the most important, or the chief? And this is really an appeal by the psalmist for consideration. It says, consider mine affliction and deliver me, for I do not forget thy law. And that really reminds me of Job. It says, plead my cause and deliver me, quicken me according to thy word. You know, in Job, I believe it's 14:1, says, man that's born of a woman is a few days and full of trouble. You know, that reminds me of Job there. It says, salvation is far from the wicked, for they seek not thy statutes. Great are thy tender mercies, O Lord. Quicken me according to thy judgments. There's that twice in this one octane. Many are my persecutors and mine enemies, yet do I not decline from thy testimonies. I beheld the transgressors and was grieved, because they kept not thy word. Consider how I love thy precepts. Quicken me, O Lord, according to thy loving kindness. Thy word is true from the beginning, and every one of thy righteous judgments endureth forever. I guess if you could take anything out of this, we've really got to look for God's quickening and for his restoration and strengthening. And he's asking for it by his word there in 154, and by his tender mercies and judgments in verse 156, and his loving kindness in verse 159. And that's so that he can endure. You got to be an overcomer if you're going to endure. It's easier said than done, though. Easier said than done. Anybody got anything before we move to the next one? We might finish up this Psalm 119. The next one is Shin, or it can pronounce it with an S or an SH, so it can be sin or Shin. It represents the number 300. And the words that go along with this are teeth, ivory, the point of a rock, a peak, to devour, to consume, to destroy, something sharp, or El Shaddai, which means God Almighty. And I believe the psalmist here is just standing in awe of God's word. It says, the princes have persecuted me without a cause, but my heart standeth in awe of thy word. Now, some people believe that David has written this psalm. Others believe it could be somebody else. But whoever it is standing in the presence of princes here. Well, the average person did not do that. So whoever they are, they have some authority. But he's saying here the princes persecuted him without a cause, but his heart standeth in awe of the word, of thy word. I rejoice at thy word as one that findeth great spoil. It says, I hate and abhor lying, but thy law do I love. 7 times a day do I praise thee because of thy righteous judgments. Well, I read that, 7 times a day. Daniel had a set time. He prayed 3 times a day, like clockwork. So I studied this a little bit, and it's a Hebrew phrase that 7 times is a phrase meaning it's more than expected. He's saying that he has prayed more than people would expect him to pray, or even maybe God would expect him to pray. It's not literal that he prayed 7 times a day, and he could have. I don't know that, but it is an old Hebrew phrase meaning more often than expected. It says, great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. We'll come back to that. It says, Lord, I have hoped for thy salvation, and done thy commandments. My soul hath kept thy testimonies, and I love them exceedingly. I have kept thy precepts and thy testimonies, for all my ways are before thee. So precepts, testimonies, the commandments, rules, and go back to 165. It says, great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. I listened to a guy one time. He did a very good thing on the laws of God. He said that he went out his back door and his dog was out there, German Shepherd, but it was standing on point, just staring at the ground. He said, I went outside to just see what was going on, and he said there was a little multicolored finch like you would buy at the pet store, huddled down there just looking at the German Shepherd. He said, wow, somebody's lost their pet. He said, so I got down there and stuck my finger out, and a little bird hopped up on it and was pretty happy. He said, I took it in the house, and my wife was cooking, and I showed her. I said, look what I've brought home. And he said, I prepared it a place. You know, he said, I got a bird cage, and I put it in the cage, and he said, that bird was happy. And he said, I know there's people right now saying, you should give the bird its freedom. He said, well, it had its freedom. He said, it was about to lose it to a German Shepherd. He said, but in that cage, that bird was happy. He said, it would just sing, and I'd feed it. And he said, the point I'm trying to make is, he said, some people look at God's laws like it's a prison holding you captive. He said, but if you look at God's laws as a cage keeping you secure, it's a whole nother way of looking at it. Amen. Just like I said last week, working for somebody is different than working with somebody. You know, I thought that was a real good analogy, though. Those bars are there for your protection, not to keep you hemmed up. Pretty good. Anybody got anything before we go to the last one? All right. It's a towel, and you can pronounce it with a TH or a T. And I did find a copy of that, and I tried to print it. My dang printer's out of ink. I'll get y'all one. We'll make some copies. That way you can have it to look at. It represents the number 400. It means a mark, a sign, an X, or a cross, ownership, to seal, a covenant, join two things together, or the last. And I guess if you could put a title on this one, it would be a closing appeal to God by the psalmist. And something to notice here, this psalmist here in this last octrane is praying, he's praying for his prayers. And if you'll notice, there's no mention of his enemies. I just thought it was interesting. It says, let me cry, come near before thee, O Lord, give me understanding according to thy word. Let my supplication come before thee. Deliver me according to thy word. My lips shall utter praise when thou hast taught me thy statutes. My tongue shall speak of thy word, for all thy commandments are righteousness. Let thine hand help me, for I have chosen thy precepts. I have longed for thy salvation, O Lord, and thy law is my delight. Let my soul live, and it shall praise thee, and let thy judgments help me. I have gone astray like a lost sheep. Seek thy servant, for I do not forget thy commandments. Go back to 169. It says, let my cry come near before thee. O Lord, give me understanding according to thy word. Okay. We live in a world that has, they'll look at something and it has 4 or 5 different views on the same subject. But what does the word say on the subject? It don't matter what I think. It matters what this thinks. And that's what he's asking for here. Give me understanding according to thy word. There's no points of view. There's God's point of view. What does the book say about this situation? It's not up for debate. It's black and white. We're either for God or we're against God. And I've been on both sides of it. So, me and Jimmy was talking there the other day. Man, I come across things all the time in here I don't like. But it don't mean I can't change it, I come across things all the time I don't like. But as we finish this Psalm 119, and I am very inadequate to have done this, we've only scratched the surface. All I've done is give you some information and an outline. I would encourage you to study this yourself with much prayer and see what its personal meaning for you is. Because these Psalms are very personal, and this Psalm 119 is very, very personal. But as I was looking forward, seeing what we're going to get into next, the Songs of Degrees, I came across in Psalm 138. Y'all know how jealous God is of his name. He puts a lot of emphasis on his name. But there's one thing that he puts above his name. And we'll start in verse 1. It says, I will praise thee with my whole heart. Before the gods will I sing praise unto thee, little g's. I will worship toward thy holy temple and praise thy name for thy loving kindness and for thy truth. For thou hast magnified thy word above all thy name. So God puts more stock in this word than he does in his name, which he jealously defends. There's several times in here he said, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for my name's sake. I'm doing it for my character. And I'm not doing it for you. He's told that to Israel many times. So he puts this word even above his name. And I come across that last night, and I was like, man. So we get to carry a copy of that around with us. And so many times I don't give it enough regard as this psalmist has here in this Psalm 119. He sums it up there at the very end. I've gone astray like a lost sheep. Seek thy servant, for I do not forget thy commandments. Even though I've messed up, come find me, Lord. But that 169 is, give me understanding according to thy word. And we're not going to go any further today. I don't even know how much time we got left or nothing. So we'll start next week into the Song of Degrees. And there's quite a bit of background to this to help you understand it. I can give you a little bit of insight into it. On the Song of Degrees, if you were a Hebrew, 3 times a year you were required to come to Jerusalem to 3 different feasts. And I don't have those notes in front of me. But they would meet up in caravans, and as they went toward Jerusalem, they would sing songs. And those songs of degrees was the closer they got, they would change to a different psalm. And that's the reason it's called a Song of Degrees. But we'll get into that next week, crack that open and see how far we get there. Has anybody got anything before we close out? Nothing? Carrie's tired. All right. We'll take a break there and we'll see what the preacher's got. Vanessa.